The night my best friend cut my air at 90 feet, the ocean didn't roar. It went quiet, like a cathedral closing its doors. People think drowning is noise and panic. It isn't. It's the slowest betrayal you'll ever taste. First the hiss stops, then the bubbles thin, then the water presses its palm against your mouth like a shush. After that, time stops keeping score. My name is Nico Serrano, and I made a life beneath the surface. Commercial diver, salvage, rescue when the Coast Guard called, and there wasn't time to ask what it would cost. I knew currents away some men, no back roads. I knew how to breathe when everyone else forgot. And I trusted Evan, my dive partner, my brother in everything but blood. We split contracts, gear, a lease on a battered slip in a marina the tourists forgot. We split secrets, too. The kind you hang on hooks above the workbench and hope never get used. Mara was the only thing we didn't split. She picked me. Evan said he was fine. I wanted to believe him. The job that night was clean on paper, a late-season run off Breakwater Point. A storm had rolled through 2 days before, and an insurance company wanted eyes on a small sailboat sitting upside down on the bottom. They said it was intact, likely salvageable. I said I'd take a look and see if she'd be kind enough to come home. We dropped after midnight because ocean thieves do their shopping in the dark. The night felt heavier than it should. Evan cracked jokes on the deck, too loud, too slick. I chalked it up to nerves. He was always braver above water. At 85 feet, the boat appeared, white hull like a rib cage, mast raking the seafloor like a match struck and blown out. My light slid over it, stars of silt following me. I ran my hand along the keel out of habit. A hello you give to lonely things. My hoses thumped gently against my shoulder with my breathing. Down was down, and I was at work. When I turned to signal to Evan, he wasn't there. His light was, hovering behind me like an eye. I gave the okay sign, 2 fingers circled a thumb, and waited for his answer. It didn't come. His light moved closer, too close. I felt a tug at the back of my neck, and then silence. People talk about fight or flight. At 90 feet, there's only thought. The kind that hurts because it's too clear. I knew I had maybe a minute of air trapped in the line and my lungs before my body started believing the lie the ocean was telling it. I knew panic would make me breathe it out faster. I knew that knives are heavier than you think when the cold climbs into your fingers. I also knew that Evan had cut my feed with one smooth pull. Not tangled, not an accident. Planned, practiced again. The way you learn to smile while you're doing it. I didn't look for him. I looked for solutions. Emergency bottle. Knife. The boat's hull. My hands. The shape of escape. I popped the pony bottle, bit the regulator like it might bite me back, and sipped air so slow I could feel the hiss taste like tin. The knife found the line and freed me from my umbilical. I didn't head up. Bad idea in the dark with a minute tank and a man behind you holding malice like a spare. I went under the hull instead, into the pocket of trapped air where the storm had flipped this little world and mercy had let it keep a few breaths for later. I surfaced into a black dome of night under white fiberglass. The space smelled like oil, salt, and old fear. I took the regulator out and found air with my own mouth. It tasted ugly. It tasted alive. I kept my breathing slow, listened to the ocean talk to itself, and waited. Evan's light passed the seam where water met hull. It flickered once, twice, then moved off. I heard my cut line bump the keel. After a moment, his light disappeared completely. He left me. I don't know how long I sat in that pocket counting heartbeats and hating the shape of his name. Long enough to wait him out. Long enough to understand that hate can be a flare, bright and stupid, or a pilot light. I chose pilot. When I finally eased back under, the sea had rearranged itself into menace and math. I took the slow path up, pausing where my body asked without turning it into prayer. When my head broke the surface, the night had teeth again. The boat that brought us was gone. The horizon was only darker darkness. The cold crawled in my bones like a debt collector. I rolled onto my back and started for shore. Breakwater Point was a black thumbprint against a slightly less black sky. My body became a machine. Kick, breathe, count. The ocean lifted me like a rumor and tried to set me down on the wrong side of it. I kept my head to the rhythm of stubbornness. I hit rocks that felt like old men. I crawled up them until I found a seam of sand. I vomited seawater and grief into the surf and lay there until the stars looked like screws. It was past 3 when I staggered into the marina, looking like a ghost who'd lost a fight. Evan's truck sat there, empty, dry. The coil of my cut airline lay in the bed like a trophy. He hadn't been worried about me showing up. He had been certain I wouldn't. When I pushed open the door to our workshop, the smell hit me first. Oil, coffee burnt into the shape of a pot, Mara's shampoo, still living in a towel draped over the back of a chair. She was there, sitting on the workbench, eyes red, a phone clutched in her hand like it owed her answers. "Nico," she said, relief collapsing her shoulders. "God, he called, said you were." I waited for the word. "Lost. Gone." My mouth turned it into something else. "He tried to be a widower without the wedding," I said, voice raw. Mara's face broke at the edges. "Nico, he said you cut your own line, that you panicked." I laughed then, a sound with no polish. "I don't panic." I told her as much as night could hold. Her mouth hardened in a way that made me think of weather. "I'll go to the police," she said. I shook my head. "With what? A bad story at the bottom of the bay?" 2 men went down. One came up different. "It's not a crime if the ocean keeps the rest." She swallowed. "He left you to die." "Worse," I said. "He expected me to." There are moments when a future forks, and you can almost hear the grain tear. Mara put the phone down and came to me. She touched my face like it might disappear under her hand. "What do we do?" she asked. Her use of "we" broke something open in me that wasn't sadness. "We rebuild," I said, "and we remove him from the water. You don't take a man like Evan to court. You take him apart by the only law he actually believes in, leverage." His greed was a map. I knew the legends on it better than anyone. He had a salvage license he didn't deserve and a tighter relationship with an insurance adjuster than ethics would allow. He had a habit of getting to wrecks too fast and ending up with valuables the manifest swore didn't exist. He had seagulls for friends and accountants for priests. So I did the unglamorous thing first. I made lists. I wrote the names of every night call that came in from the Coast Guard and where it landed. I wrote down which adjusters called him twice. I wrote down the jobs that didn't fit, the ones that smelled like fish left on a dashboard. And I rebuilt a boat. Not our old half-honest, half-stubborn tub, but a creature that wanted to work. A hull like a promise, winches that had their own gravity, lights that turned night into a suggestion. I took jobs nobody wanted because the reward wasn't a headline. A crabber's engine mid-channel. A capsized skiff with a heartbroken man on the shore hoping his father's tackle box would come back like a dog. Every time we brought someone's almost lost back to the surface, the Marina remembered we could be trusted. Mara ran comms, books, the coffee, the world. She learned NOAA maps like a second language and could quote the tide tables in her sleep. She kept my stubbornness from turning into accident. She never asked again if we should go to the police. She knew the ocean prefers restitution to report. Word got around. The Coast Guard never said they had favorites, but they liked when I answered it to and said, "I'm already moving." The harbor master learned the line of my boat and didn't pretend not to see it. Word got around to him, too. Evan started showing up just after we'd finished a recovery, smile like wet paper. "Hell of a job," he'd say, eyes counting our gear, our crew. "Lot of risk for not much reward." "It's not always about reward," I'd say. He'd grin wider. "Then you'll die poor." It should have frightened me that he looked at me and still saw a man he could push off a ledge. Instead, it made me patient. If he thought I was harmless, he'd get sloppy. He did. It was a freighter this time. A mid-sized container ship the storm had shouldered onto a sandbar near the mouth. She wasn't going anywhere soon, and the company that owned her was desperate to keep the story quiet. Pay was obscene. Liability more so. You needed licenses stacked like pancakes to even say the word salvage around her. Evan had them, or he had pieces of paper that said he did. I didn't. Not the ones that mattered. I had something else. Receipts in a city of men who liked me better than him. So I took the small contract, nobody's favorite, always needed perimeter safety. Keep rubberneckers from turning into funerals. Keep small boats from clipping their hulls on steel teeth. Keep the Coast Guard from having to yell, "Stay back," until their throats turn to gravel. For 3 nights, we patrolled the edge of someone else's disaster. On the third, I saw Evan's boat slide where it shouldn't. Inside the marked radius, lights dirty, angles wrong. He was moving 2 guys like greased shadows over a section of open container that had no business being open. They weren't looking for structural integrity. They were shopping. I called it in. Not to the company. They'd bury it. Not to the insurance adjuster. He'd sell it to Evan at a discount. I called the only woman whose job gets sharper when men lie. Lieutenant Adams, Coast Guard. Hard eyes, fair voice. The kind of woman the sea resents because she doesn't take its romance as tax. Unofficially, she said, "I don't love that call." Officially, "I'll send a patrol. You keep your distance." I did as told. Mostly. I kept my distance with my boat, and I closed the rest on foot. It's not trespassing if you're already part of the rescue perimeter and your boots know how to sit in silence. From the blind belly of Crate Stack, I watched Evan's boys pop seals they had no right to touch. A rectangle the color of taxes came up with reverence. Jewelry? Tech. Something the manifest would cry about in the morning while making contingency plans by lunch. I took pictures. I took video. I took a small pleasure in how bad thieves are at looking over their shoulders when they think the ocean loves them. The Coast Guard arrived with flashers that turned everyone honest. Evan bluffed, then blustered, then smiled flat. I stayed where I was supposed to be and watched him make friends with a warning. Lieutenant Adams called me the next day. "We didn't catch enough to charge him." "You won't," I said. "He's good at being almost legal." "Then why call me?" "Because one of these days he'll trade almost for actually," I said. "And I want you already looking." "You want him," she said. "I want him off the water," I said. "He makes the ocean meaner." "Keep your camera handy," she said. I did. 2 weeks later, the ocean presented me with a gift I hated, a storm with the wrong kind of wind. It lit up the horizon like bad decisions and rolled a charter fishing boat without asking it a single question. There were 6 souls aboard. 2 made it to the breakwater. 1 didn't. 3 were missing when the call came. Mara's voice didn't shake when she woke me. Coordinates are pinging off Dead Man's Shelf. Dead Man's Shelf is an old joke with a bad punchline. A lip of rock that holds onto things the sea would rather eat. It's shallow enough to invite, sharp enough to regret, and long enough to make the Coast Guard curse because it's like trying to read Braille with your face. We were first out. Evan was second. He pulled up beside us like we were partners again. "Truce," he called across water that didn't care who was holy. "Not a war," I called back. "A job." We dropped lines like prayers. The shelf was chewing. My headset filled with men, repeating depth numbers like truths they needed to be true. We found 2. One alive, the other with the stillness of low tide. We hauled them up, and the night said thank you with less wind. The third we couldn't find. Evan got impatient. He always had more hurry than sense when there was a chance for spotlight. He knows his boat inside a contour I wouldn't trust on a dare. He dropped a diver too fast and too close to a place where the ocean keeps secrets. I heard it before I saw it. A crack like a knuckle somewhere enormous. Then I saw it. His diver's light tumble, then fix, then go black. His line snapped taut and then slack. His crew shouted in Spanish and English in fear. "Man over. Man stuck. We lost him, we on it," I said, already moving. Mara's voice cut into mine sharp. "Nico, don't, but some debts collect themselves. If I could bring his man back, I could buy myself a kind of justice even Evan would respect. I took the edge where the shelf feeds the hungry. I could feel it under my palms, a throat swallowing. The water had that taste it gets when it's angry at you for being brave. His diver was pinned under a yard of steel that had learned how to be cruel. I slid my shoulder under and became a jack. My bones remembered work they didn't want. The trap man's eyes were too big for his hood. I told him lies about oxygen that felt like truth. When the metal shifted, it sang the bad song. He popped loose like a confession. We hauled him up between boats. His hands grabbed mine like religion. He vomited water into the space between us and sobbed. The ocean calmed at the edges as if amused. Evan reached for me. "Thank you," he said, voice not sure what shape to be. We were alone on the cut water for 3 seconds longer than the night meant to give us. The lights, the men, the voices became a curtain. "You still owe me," I said. His jaw tightened. "For what?" "For 90 feet," I said. We looked at each other like once upon a time. He smiled because he didn't have any other tools. "You can't prove it." "I don't need to prove it," I said. "I need to end it." He went still. Then he laughed, relief choosing him again. "You can't end me. You're too good." "Not tonight," I said. "But soon." Mara didn't scold me. She didn't have to. The ocean gave us a body the next afternoon. One of the missing. The family cried in Spanish the way crying should always be done. We handed them their grief and went home as if the night hadn't made promises. Here's the thing about patient hate. It doesn't rot. It ferments. It becomes something strong enough to burn clean. Evan made his mistake on a Tuesday, because Tuesdays make men lazy. A container fell during offload in a storm that wasn't supposed to be a storm. It hung from a crane like a badly kept secret. The yard foreman called everyone he could call to keep it quiet. Evan answered like money. He rolled in with a crew that looked like work and smelled like theft. He signed forms his license didn't actually cover. He moved under a machine that any sober man would have nodded to and gone around. He opened a container with a seal he didn't check against a manifest he didn't read. What he thought was televisions became marked medical equipment worth more than his boat. What he thought was the port's business turned out to be federal. And I filmed every second of it from a stack my boots had no right sitting on. Lieutenant Adams didn't bring one patrol. She brought 3. The sirens lit up a sky that had been waiting to be dramatic. Evan tried to argue past them. He tried to charm a number of a law he didn't understand. He reached for any door that had worked for him before and found them nailed shut. They took him like a storm takes an umbrella. Efficiently, without apology. I stood outside the chain link and let the wind turn my jacket into a flag. He saw me as they put him into the back of the SUV. His mouth made my name like it had stepped on something sharp. "This isn't over," he said. "It was over at 90 feet," I said. "This is the last page. Trials are for men who read." I sat through his with the boredom of a man who's already done the hard parts. The charges had numbers. The kind that stack. Fraud, tampering, theft, endangerment. The cut line at Breakwater Point didn't appear in any filings. The ocean had held that secret in its teeth and refused to give it to a courtroom. That made me angry for a while. That made me grateful. Some debts are ocean business. He was sentenced without theater. Years into dust. His eyes looked for me as if I might offer him a rope made of grace. I offered him my silence. When they took him away, the Marina didn't cheer. It exhaled. Men resumed arguing about bait and whether like the world had put a shoulder back in its socket. We kept working, because revenge is a fire that burns out, and work is a stove that keeps a room warm. Mara and I married in the slowest possible way. One day, I realized there wasn't a distance between us that wasn't useful. We said vows on the deck with the harbor as witness, the gulls pretending not to care. Lieutenant Adams stood awkward and happy and didn't tell me she cried later, because she's the kind who cries for the right things in private. We made the kind of money that let you sleep. Not a king's, not a martyr's. A worker's. We put a small percentage into a fund nobody asked us to create. The kind that helps families pay for funerals when the ocean is mean, or not lose a boat to a loan shark who thinks suffering is a flavor. Sometimes at night, I drive past Breakwater Point and roll the window down to see if the dark still wants to tell me a story. It usually doesn't. The ocean is old. It doesn't owe me reruns. Once, in a winter storm docile enough to flirt but not kiss, I took the long route past the shelf where men write their names in bad decisions. The water was the color of slate and learning. I killed the engine and let us drift. The boat sighed the way Goodwood does in old houses. 90 feet, I said to no one. I'm still here. The ocean didn't answer. It put its finger to its lips again, softly. Shush. I thought of Evan in a box smaller than any he ever opened. I thought of his hand on my line, the neatness of that cut. I felt no pleasure. Some victories are too true for gloating. I felt something else. Relief that the water had not kept me, and responsibility to earn the breath I stole back from it. People ask me sometimes when they bring me coffee and money and men who need my stubbornness if I ever forgave him. No, forgiveness is a word for mistakes. Betrayal is a word for choices. If I stop carrying him, that's different. That's a man setting down a coil of rope that wasn't his to begin with. On the dock behind the workshop, there's a nail where I hang the spare regulators to dry like saints. Above it, nailed crooked, is a sliver of white hull the size of a hand, what the sea gave back from that little sailboat that tried to be alone. It reminds me that sometimes the ocean saves breath for you, and sometimes it takes it. It reminds me that men will often do the ocean's worst work for it and call it plan. It also reminds me that I did not die when he told me to. I found air where there wasn't any in time, where the clock had been turned to the wall. I came home. I made home something worth coming to. When the Coast Guard calls now, the phone doesn't ring so much as clear its throat. I answer before it finishes. Serrano, I say, and then I'm already moving. I keep a coil of line in the bow that's softer than it looks. When my hands touch it, they remember, not pain, not fear, the shape of refusal, the way a man says no to the kind of ending another man cuts for him. The ocean and I are not friends. We're colleagues. We sign contracts with weather, and we argue the clauses in storms. Sometimes we shake hands. Often, we nod from a distance and say, I see you, and let that be enough. The Marina still smells like mornings even at night. Oil and brine and the sweet rot of rope. Men still argue about nonsense that matters to them like it's a sacrament. The gulls still stage coups against unattended donuts. The tide still keeps an appointment it has never missed. When I walk the planks, boot heels knocking the memory of other men up into the air, I think about the word breakwater. It sounds like a command. It's not. It's a promise. A wall built out of patience, not arrogance. You stand there and you take what tries to break you and you break it first, quietly, with the right angle, until the fury turns to lace around your ankles. That's what we do now. We take the worst the sea gives and we hand it back smaller. We set men on their feet. We pull truth out of cold places. We keep names out of the paper. We teach patience to boys who think the ocean owes them compliments. We teach grief to men who forgot how to say please. I keep my pilot light. Hate turned into something that cooks instead of burns. I keep my patience. It's the only luxury I made myself every day. I keep my hands clean because the ocean loves to show you where you've been. And at night, when Mara falls asleep with the tide's pulse pretending it's a lullaby, I step out onto the stern and look at the water that almost kept me. I don't thank it. I don't curse it. I tell it the truth. You were quiet. I say. So was I. You took him. I took me. The night doesn't argue. In the morning there will be a call. There always is. I'll answer. I'll go. The crew will lift. The winch will sing. The line will remember what it's for. The ocean will sigh. The same sentence it has said since it learned how to move. And I will breathe, the way I learned it down there, slow, precise mind.